for being able to tell people how folks voted. I mean, this really is tyranny.
Well, yes, and they want to make sure that independent organizations and corporations can't spend their money or tell people how they vote. But, you know, there are corporations, and this is where I think you can fall into the category, because if you run a newspaper or you have a TV show, that's a corporation, can be a corporation, but they're not going to regulate them. So if there is an organization or a political action committee or a private group or corporation who wants to tell people how they vote, no, you might be restricted. But they never think for a minute they should restrict the media, assuming that the media is always going to be radical left and defend their candidates. But, you know, there's just a few people on cable and radio and other places that you know, the way I would understand what they're doing, they still haven't come to trying to regulate what the TV stations are saying or what the radios are saying.
Congressman, going into another very important subject, I almost fell off my chair last Friday when the Washington Post admitted in an article that they're set to pass the financial reform bill. They admitted there's $600 trillion in derivatives. They went on, that was the first time I'd seen that in a mainstream publication, to admit that the Federal Reserve is going to have a new group with almost total autonomy, was their words, to control all other financial institutions. The Texas Banking Association president has said that the very groups that gave us derivatives with an unfair trade advantage for themselves want to be able to take over all the smaller local banks, and that really, out of the crisis, the big mega banks, J.P. Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, and others created, they are now going to get even more power over the rest of the economy, and that this is an expanded Federal Reserve coup of America. Can you elaborate on that and give us...
Yeah, and I think you've described it rather well, but that's not the way they claim it is. You know, they claim, well, this is going to protect the consumers. It's not run by the Fed. They don't have authority, but it's going to be in the Federal Reserve. They do not have control over the policy. But guess what? Guess who pays for it? The Federal Reserve pays for it. So it isn't even appropriation. It isn't even, you know, part of the appropriation process. So you have this new regulatory agency supposed to protect the consumer, but I think it's going to protect the special interests that have had all the benefits and then got bailed out. So it's this package, which passed the House yesterday, you know, is very bad for all of us, and it does give more power to all the regulators, especially the Federal Reserve. And I don't know whether you want to talk about it now, but that's where I offered my motion to recommit, dealing with the audit the Fed bill. Were you up on that?
No, that's exactly where I wanted to go next. I wanted to illustrate for listeners that just joined us that Congressman Ron Paul is here. 20-something years ago in Congress, he couldn't get one co-sponsor, and I wanted to make this point. It seems the House and Senate are schizophrenic. The House votes by 2/3 to pass your bill to truly audit the quasi-governmental banking holding company, the Federal Reserve, that took over in 1913, but then, which is the right thing to do, but it never passed the Senate properly. And then now they're back giving the Federal Reserve even more power outside of government and Congress to regulate themselves. I mean, this is amazing. So break that oxymoron down for us and tell us about your new amendment.
Well, it tells you about the hypocrisy of this whole place and how it works and how powerful the Fed is. You're right. We passed it in the Financial Services Committee, the Audit the Fed bill, and it was part of the reform package. Then it came to the House floor, and they kept it in, so the House floor supported it. We have 320 co-sponsors. Then it goes to the conference with the Senate, and they drop it. They put some things in there to look at the Fed, which are slightly helpful, but they get rid of the true audit. So when the bill comes back to the House, guess what? We don't have the audit bill provision in there. So I was able to offer an amendment, which was a recommit amendment, to send it back to committee and put back in the true audit. And we had an up and down vote on that, and we lost it by a significant amount. 320 co-sponsors, and we lost it. 114 people who were co-sponsors of this bill switched and voted against the bill that they were co-sponsors of.
And now they've got the Feds sicked on Campaign for Liberty and every other organization. so that you can't tell the public that they flip-flopped and engaged in treason. They know that there's been a major political realignment, not left or right, but towards the Constitution, and that all incumbents across the country are either losing or on the verge of losing in the primaries, and they are scared to death, and they're trying to stop us from being able to communicate to them the truth. This is treason against our way of government and our life.
I don't think they're going to stop the information from getting out. It's, the internet is at the moment still too big. They can't control it. People are going to find out, and they still have access to government records, and they can find out who those 114 individuals were who flipped on this vote. And, if we're worth our salt and this message, this issue is important, it will play a role in the elections this fall.
All right, now I want to rocket through points with Congressman Ron Paul in the time we've got left with him. The way I read the Supreme Court ruling, it's take 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. The gun grabbers are hailing it as a victory, saying, well, at least we've got a Supreme Court ruling saying we can now restrict the Second Amendment under law. And so basically, if you can jump through 100 hoops, maybe you can have access to a gun and keep it unloaded in your house. Chicago, you can't have a total ban, but you can basically have almost a total ban. But others are hailing this as a big victory. Congressman, how do you see it?
Well, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I'm still hoping that it will be, because it's certainly perceived that way. And the people who hate guns and don't believe we should have them, they're hysterical. They're going nuts. So I'm hopeful that, yes, more people will have guns and more people will be able to defend themselves. That things have improved slightly in Washington. I hope they've improved, even if it's not the total package, it will improve slightly in Chicago, and then maybe it will be of great benefit to us, because what they'll probably find out is that the crime rate will go down. It has in every other city, so I haven't written it off saying that, no, this won't improve things. I think more people are going to have guns in Chicago in order to defend themselves.
Well, I agree with you to a certain extent, because I don't like having concealed carry, because that turns a right into a privilege in states where it's already legal to carry a gun holstered. But if you pass it in Texas or Florida and the crime rates drop by over 20% in both states, the same numbers in other states, even though it's a restriction to a certain extent, it illustrates that more guns means less crime, and so you win the overall intellectual war.
Yeah, that's a powerful message, and I think more and more people are coming around to that. And I think politically we generally have won this. They sort of come into some of these regulations through the back door. That in the last several elections, the Democratic candidate usually doesn't go out preaching about how he's going to round up the guns and register guns. They stay away from that. They pretend that, we're not going to do that, we're not going to do that. But backdoor legislation, they generally are always trying to do that.
Let's talk about the oil spill. And again, just to preface this, BP gave orders that they knew would cause a problem. It turns out 2 months before it was leaking. BP is one of the biggest contributors to Obama. They funded the carbon tax. They've got a global governance office with a vice president over it. They've always wanted to nationalize oil, so they get an inside deal. I'm very suspicious of how this has been handled. We're 70-plus days in. Obama has blocked a Taiwanese ship that can get 500,000 barrels a day scooped up. They've blocked over 30 other mega ships. Now that the hurricanes are coming in, he's saying he may look at letting them come in. Once that oil gets blown in, they're going to have a major disaster. The Washington Post is talking about forced evacuations. Obama's answer is, give me the carbon tax. Rahm Emanuel said, don't let a good crisis go to waste. I don't see this as Obama versus BP, as the media has phrased it. Really, this is Obama working with BP to try to get his carbon tax. Congressman, this is out in international water. Why don't we just have the salvagers in there to begin with? How can Obama tell people 50 miles out in the Gulf what to do?
Well, you forgot. He can write executive orders. He can write executive orders and do anything they want. So it is a real mess. If a state needs some manpower, generally they don't have manpower that might be able to help out. That would be maybe their National Guard units. They're all over in Afghanistan and Iraq. I would say that, if an emergency like this might be an incentive to say, hey, why don't you bring these troops home, and maybe even some different states would share some of their people to help. I mean, it's practically like an invasion the way this oil is coming in. But I think that, yes, I'm very suspicious of what BP and our government is doing in the Obama administration, and that's why I've even challenged the principle of this agreement they have to set up, this fund, this $20 billion fund. Sounds like a lot of money, but it sounds like there could be a lot of mischief, too. And that was done by just executive order. The president declared, we're going to have this up. And then he came to the Congress and asked even for more authority to go any place